Would you rather double a penny 30 times or be given $1 million? I don't know if you've heard that before, but you want to double the penny because after 27 doubles, you end up with $7.3 million, and you still have a few doubles to go. After 30 doubles, you have over $10 million, almost 11. That is a quote made up talking about compound interest and the power of putting your money to work for you and doubling your money. Leading up to 2015, I had worked hard and just saved my money and put it in a savings account. But in 2015, I read the book Money Master the Game, and that book taught me all about compounding interest and the power of an index fund and investing your money. So my conclusion at the end of that book was find an S&P 500 index fund and invest in it. And that was what I did in 2015. And it was a huge difference, especially today. It's been 10 years and I can look back. And so all that money that was going into a savings account, for the most part, a lot of it was going into an S&P 500. And the results are staggering. I think there's half the money in there is from the S&P 500. Whereas if it was just a savings account, I would only have half, and that's towards my retirement. So that's huge. So you should really be looking at investing anything you can into some sort of, I prefer the S&P 500 index fund, but any index fund. So if you want to invest in Microsoft, you shouldn't just invest in Microsoft per se, because what if Bill Gates dies, or what if their latest computer has some fatal flaw and everyone sells it? What if I recently invested in Nintendo because the Switch 2 is coming out, but when they did the actual reveal, they revealed it was going to be expensive. They're going to charge $80 to $100 per game. And in North America, they're going to lock out your Nintendo Switch and do a bunch of horrible business practices while suing other game companies for game mechanics, which is just a huge no-no and a horrible look. That sucks. But if there was an index fund for video game companies, I would be at least a little bit safer, because not just Nintendo needs to mess up, but every video game company in this basket of stocks, which is what an index fund is, every single company would have to make a mistake. Whereas let's say Blizzard at the same time, they just get their stuff together. They stop doing everything they've been doing. And all of a sudden they're like, we're gonna be 1998 Blizzard. We're gonna start making awesome games. And Nintendo is still doing what they're doing. Well, at least I would break even. Because Blizzard, yeah, they're gonna do the bad thing, but Nintendo's gonna do the good thing. And that's the idea of an index fund, is you're hedging your bet by betting on all these companies together equally in a certain industry. So the S&P 500 index fund is essentially the top 500 companies in the United States, more or less. That's basically what it is. And so instead of buying just Apple, just Amazon, just Netflix, just Walmart by themselves, you're getting a little piece of all of them equally. And historically, that S&P 500, which is an index by itself, it just tracks all these 500 companies. The S&P 500 has historically doubled every 10 years or about every 7 years. I like rounding up to 10. I like factoring in a little bit of a worse scenario. At the same time, I like factoring in a more positive scenario so the median's about 7 years, but I'll be like, maybe it could double in 5 years if we have a lot of good years. But if there's a decade like the 2008 financial crisis, that 7-year span, 8-year span, it might not double. So I like to prepare for that. But then there's the following 10 years, it doubled in 5 years. So if you average over 100 years, then yeah, it's about every 8 years. Sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's slower, but you can usually count on about 8 years. What you don't want to do is invest in one thing that's risky, like getting into penny stocks when you really don't know anything about them, or just going all in Bitcoin when you, again, don't know about them. The point is you should have a lot of research before you're investing in anything. You shouldn't just be diving in, because if you put all your money or a chunk of your money into, let's say, Bitcoin when it's at its peak, because everyone's hyped, everyone's excited, this is the future, Bitcoin's, oh my gosh, it's gonna go way up. But what you don't know is it has been going up and it has reached the peak. And same with any penny stock. Bitcoin might be a little different, but if you get in and it drops 50%, then you're left with 50%, which means to get back to even, you have to have a 100% gain, right? Lose 50%? Well, how do you get that 50% back when you only have 50%? You have to turn that 50% and you have to double it. You need a 100% gain. So you need to think about that when you're investing in something risky like that. And then you need to factor in that 20% of $1,000. So you make some big gain, like you do something risky, you lose 50%, but you get in somewhere and you gain 20%. 20% of $1,000 is $200. So you risked $1,000 to gain 200. And you just need to think of like the risk. If you lose 50%, then you have to gain 100% back. And you did it all for $200. So you need to kind of think like that a little bit. The biggest thing you can do starting off though is understand where your money's going. So you should be making some kind of a record. If you buy something, you should track it in your phone, like spent $100 on gas today, spent $15 at McDonald's, went to Walmart, bought a video game, spent $60, whatever. Track every day. And then you should categorize where your money goes and keep track of it that way. But on a lighter level, because a lot of times I just always forget and I tend to not do that. So there's just some basic things you should avoid. Like you shouldn't eat out a lot. I remember I had roommates and we were all, hanging out and living very similar lives, except I made all my meals. And this just happened to be because I was working out and I was tracking my meals. So I was cooking bulk meals and putting them in the freezer and then heating them up in the microwave, like 5 days worth of the same meal as a bachelor, like, chicken, beans, and potatoes, or sweet potatoes, freezing it, and then thawing. I wrote Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday on them. And every day at dinner time, I would just pull the same meal out of the freezer that I cooked, microwave it, and eat it. Financially, what that ended up doing was, I remember standing there with my roommate and them not understanding where all their money had been, where all their money went. And we were working the same job, living the same life, living in the same house. And I remember just looking and being like, yeah, like we do the same exact thing. And I was able to save my money. Like, what is the difference between me and you? Because we live the same life. Where is your money and why do I have it? And the truth was, he was eating every meal at the restaurant down the road. Never cooked for himself. And he went around, I think he really liked Buffalo Wild Wings. That can get expensive. And so that was the difference. So I had all this money to invest simply because I was bulk freezing my meals and he was going out. So stuff like that is huge, just to know, like, how many times did I eat out this week? Or how many meals did I have delivered from Uber Eats or whatever? And the same thing goes for groceries and like Amazon. If you're ordering a lot of packages, if you're ordering a lot of packages, that is a huge drain. You don't realize it, but being nickel and dimed is one of the fastest ways to lose your money that you could be using for investments. So you need to really watch how much you're ordering from these websites like Amazon and getting packages delivered, and how much you're eating out. And I think another huge thing, without going to have packages delivered, is it takes more effort to go out to a store. You got to go in your car. You got to think about what you want. You got to drive to a store. It's a pain in the butt. You got to find whatever you're looking for. And, before 2020, because 2020 really, for a lot of people, I found, made it popular to just order the stuff to your house. And that habit still persists. When the pain of going out and having to do this effort, you really have to know what you want. Like the other day, I wanted mouthwash, and I was like, no, you need to not just order one thing of mouthwash from Amazon. Make a list of things you need, and next Friday, 5-10 days from now, take that list and go get all the things you need. Like, because it is more expensive. There's no way to cut it. If it on the shelf at Walmart or wherever your local grocery store is, there's no way to cut out that delivery charge. You're basically doing the delivery yourself, and you're getting that discount. And that's huge, because you should be trying to save 10% of your money. If you're not saving 10% of your money, you need to figure something out. And I know it's hard. Right now, especially, for me, it's hard because I have a new daughter, fairly new wife, fairly new house, and 7% interest on everything. So I am pulling teeth to try and find that 10%. But that's where you need to side hustle. And you just gotta fight. You gotta find that 10%. It used to be easy. When I was a bachelor, making those meals, the 10% just happened. Anything above 10% is even better. So yeah, you gotta fight. Right now I'm buying a lot of this kind of stuff. But that's just the name of the game. You're not always gonna be able to, but when you can, you need to, because you need to get into your investments. You need your money to work for you. So while I'm buying these shoes, I can't make 10% because I'm doing all this stuff right now, and I'm fighting and I'm trying, and I can sometimes get 2 or 3% or 5%, but I can't quite get back to 10% right now. However, the money I've saved in the past and the 10% I've saved in the past and invested in the S&P 500 and in other investments, that does get 10%. That is still there, and it's almost reached a point where the 10% from that is equal to what I was saving as a bachelor. So that helps to ease the pain a little bit. I think when you're thinking about college, because you should be trying to make as much money as you can at your main job without being miserable to death. So when you're thinking about what you want to do, what career you want to get, you should really think hard about college, because this is a pretty big step. And I've seen two things happen. I've seen plenty of people go to college, get their degree, and then hate the job so much, or just not be able to utilize the degree, that they just end up with a normal job, like waitressing or whatever, and then they have that college debt on top of it, where if they had just come out of the gate waitressing, they would have been fine. But also, I've seen people who made wise college decisions and were really intentional with their degree, and they found their way to Easy Street, and they're just making huge six-figure salaries, and they're doing jobs that they don't mind, and like really well off and really secure, and kind of that cradle to the grave. Like once you get that career, it's like your cradle. Like it's gonna protect you and it's gonna help you all the way until you pass. Cradle to the grave, taking care of you. So you really have to stop and think about what degree you're getting and how you're gonna use it, and if you will use it. Which, to the next point, is either way, you need to be investing in yourself. And I used to always hate hearing that, because I was always like, what do you mean? I'm just living. You know, I'm working. I used to hang siding. I'm screwing in bolts into the wall. I'm trying to write these novels, but I don't know, what does invest in myself mean? And this could be, this counts. Like, college is investing in yourself. Learning a trade, going to a trade school, or getting a job where you learn a trade, that is investing in you. Anything you do, side hustle or with your job, you are investing in yourself, but you need to be intentional in growing and figuring out how things work and how you can be valuable towards this company or this industry or this thing you're trying to do. I thought I was doing YouTube for fun forever. Of course, I always wanted to make some kind of a career out of YouTube or something, or have just a great side hustle. And I have been doing it for 10 years. I've learned so much about YouTube that I just had almost an awakening about investing in yourself, because I see the matrix when it comes to YouTube a little bit in a lot of ways. Like, I can see the zeros and ones, you know? When a video does well, I know what to look for. And I know to understand why it did well and how to try and recreate some of these things, and how to turn around and leverage these same ideas on something like Instagram or TikTok or in other places. And I accidentally invested in myself, and just through sheer repetition, learned how to do this thing. And so you should be working on your passions in such a way where you understand where, even if you don't think so, you are getting better. And at some point you'll reach a point where you become an expert in whatever you're doing. So you should think about what you want to do and start putting your effort and time into what you want to be an expert at. And I found it takes about 8 years. And I was talking to my brother, and he has been doing excavating for about that amount of time, 8 to 10 years. And I was like, yeah, 8 years, like whatever you choose to do it for 8 years. And that's when you'll start to see success. That's when you'll on average, get your 10,000 hours in, they call it, which is it takes about 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. So if you're willing to put in 8 years, which to be honest, 8 years flies by, especially if you enjoy what you're doing and you understand that you will constantly be growing while you're doing this thing. Because my brother was telling me he's really good at excavating now. He's like, if he lost everything, he could pick up in the ashes and take up excavating and know exactly what to do and how to do it and get back on his feet. Or he could go work for someone and help them do that and get paid by them well to do that kind of a thing. So you really should be spending 8 years. You should just know if you pick something up, like this is day one, and you're just going to slowly grow. And then by year 10, you're just off to the races. Like year 8 is when people outside of you start recognizing and going, like this really is their thing. You should also be avoiding drugs and alcohol, because these are all things that slow you down. They harm your body. And I know maybe a lot of people can't avoid it altogether, but whatever you have to do to minimize drugs and alcohol, because these hinder you, one, and two, you can get ahead of everyone else who does that. Like there's your first step right there. In a race for who's successful, you're already off the finish line. So you get a head start. On the same line, you should be exercising and maintaining your health. Because in this life, you have a span from about 25 to 55, where that is your main time to work, to make your money, and if you're exercising, you're optimizing your ability to capitalize on those prime money and investing years, which are huge for your retirement. And you can also extend those times where maybe 55, if you've really been adamant and you walk a lot and you exercise properly and you eat properly, you avoid drugs and alcohol as much as possible, you could extend 55 to 75. I've seen it done. And you can imagine an extra 20 years or whatever you can extend of just prime you for the most part. I mean, you're not going to play in the NFL forever once you start getting near 40, but as far as your brain function and in general, just everyday working, exercise, avoiding drugs and alcohol, it can keep you in tip-top shape and in the moment and make it last longer throughout your life to get more out of those prime years. You should also be careful with interest. Like my last house that I lived in, we had a 4% interest, something like that. And it was very manageable. But now, in the current times, and I think it was 2023, maybe 2024, early like Christmas 2023, the interest rate was almost 8%. And I don't think I even realized, because I've never had credit card debt. So that 8% is brutal. It turns, I could have, compared to my old house, I could have bought $1 million house. It feels like sometimes when this bill comes in and all that money, all the extra money is going to the bank. And basically, as far as I'm concerned, as far as it being part of my life, it's just getting burned. It's going up in flames. So you should be aware of the interest on the things you buy and how that is a secret expense to you. And that includes credit cards. You should definitely be trying to get your credit cards down, trying to get your vehicle payments down, trying to get your house payment refinance. I'm waiting for better interest rates to refinance and get this down, because right now it's at 7%, and that is just ridiculous. We actually refinance for 1.5% less just to get that interest rate a little bit lower. So definitely avoid interest rates, but understand that you do have to leverage sometimes, which is the opposite advice. Whereas if you're investing in a business or you're trying to have income coming in, but you have to spend for it, you have to be aware of you'd be leveraging your interest, which is loaning money to try and buy things to make money. And I'm not going to get into that, but it's just, you have to be aware. But in general, in your life, if at all possible, avoid interest like the plague. So as far as investing in owning a home and with anything, you should always buy low and sell high, which is obvious, but too many times people see a company skyrocketing and they think, oh my gosh, this thing is skyrocketing, I gotta go in. But usually you're too late, and you should avoid that. And at the same time, if something's crashing and you feel panicked and you feel like you have to get out, you should avoid that as well. As far as like the S&P 500 and things like that, because like in the 1929 stock market crash, it took 5 years of the S&P 500, or essentially the S&P 500, I don't think it was around back then, but the top 500 companies in the United States basically dropped for 5 straight years of the stock market. And it took about 10 years, maybe almost 12 or 13, but the market recovered and then it kept shooting up. The money put in 1929 at this point, which is 100 years later, 95 years later, 94 years later. Anyway, it has doubled so many times. And there were so many people in 1929 that pulled out that, I mean, not a lot of them are still around today, don't get me wrong, if they were old enough to invest back then. However, by the 1980s and stuff, if they didn't pull out, they were well off, and it was a benefit just because they didn't sell low. And what they really should have done is, in that moment when it was crashing, instead of selling their stocks, they should have been taking all the cash and all the savings they could get, and they should have been investing, and they would be so well off if that's what they did. So yeah, do what you can to save 10% by not eating out, not getting everything delivered to you, avoiding high interest, side hustling, work on yourself, avoid bad habits, and run to good habits. Exercise, invest in safe and easy, usually index funds, Be smart, understand what you're investing in. If you're gonna go in on one thing, and take care of yourself. But remember, you can't take it with you when you go. So if some things cost a little bit more, sometimes it's worth it. Bye.